I wasn't supposed to see the photograph. It was meant to stay hidden behind champagne glasses and forced smiles at my parents' 40th anniversary party, the party they'd specifically told me not to attend. But when my brother posted it online at 11:30 that night, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered like fine china hitting concrete. My name is Bianca, and before you hear what happened next, I need you to do something. If you've ever been the one left out, the one whose feelings didn't matter, the one who gave everything only to be erased when it was convenient, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on the notification bell. Also leave a comment where you are listening from, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's the story of every person who was told they were too much trouble, too difficult, or too honest for a family that preferred comfortable lies. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why some truths are worth burning bridges for. Before we get into it, I would like you to grab a cup of coffee and stay with me as we ride together into this story. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was elbow deep in paint samples at the hardware shop where I work in Brighton. Mum's voice came through tinny and rehearsed, like she'd practiced the words in front of a mirror before dialing. "Darling, your father and I have been talking." She paused, and in that pause I could hear 40 years of marriage, of choosing sides and looking the other way. "We've decided it's best if you don't come to the anniversary party. It would just be awkward. You understand?" I stood there holding a can of misty morning gray, watching the color swatch blur as my eyes went hot. "Awkward for who?" I asked. "Don't make this difficult, Bianca. Your brother's bringing Penelope, and after everything that's happened, we think it's better if you're not there for everyone's sake." Penelope. The name alone made my stomach clench. My former best friend since secondary school. My brother Hugo's new fiancée. And the reason my engagement had exploded 6 months earlier. Let me take you back, because none of this makes sense without understanding how perfectly Penelope had dismantled my life. I met Callum at university. He was studying architecture, I was doing graphic design, and we bumped into each other at a terrible student film screening where we both stayed until the end out of politeness. Afterward, standing in the rain outside the cinema, he'd said, "That was the worst 90 minutes of my life." And I'd laughed so hard I'd snorted. We were engaged within 2 years. Penelope had been my maid of honor. She'd helped me choose the venue, a restored barn in the Sussex countryside. She'd sat with me for hours looking at table settings and arguing over whether blush pink was too predictable. She'd held my hand when I'd cried over my grandmother's death 3 months before the wedding, telling me Grandma would be there in spirit. What she didn't tell me was that she'd been sleeping with Callum for 5 months. I found out the way people always seem to in these stories, stupidly, accidentally, and humiliatingly. I'd borrowed Callum's laptop because mine was updating, and when I opened his messages to send myself a file, there they were. Months of conversations. Photos I will never unsee. Plans made around my work schedule. Jokes about how I never noticed things right in front of me. The worst message, the one that still wakes me up some nights, was from 3 weeks before our wedding. Penelope had written, "Only 21 days until she's legally tied to you and I can stop pretending to care about napkin colors. Then we can tell her together and you'll finally be free." They'd been planning to let me marry him. Let me stand in that barn in a white dress, say vows in front of everyone I loved, and then destroy it all. Like it was a joke. Like I was the setup and they were the punchline. I cancelled the wedding 2 weeks before the date. Lost the deposits, all £15,000 of them. Lost my dignity, and I lost the life I'd been building. What I didn't expect to lose was my family. Hugo had started dating Penelope 4 months after my engagement ended. When I'd confronted him, his face had gone tight and defensive. "It's not like you own her, Bianca. People move on. She made a mistake and she apologized. Maybe if you weren't so bitter about it, you could be happy for us." Bitter, he said. That word had wormed its way into every conversation after that. When I'd asked Mum why she'd invited Penelope to Sunday lunch, she'd sighed. "Darling, I know you're still bitter, but she's Hugo's girlfriend now. We have to be civil." When I'd skipped Dad's birthday dinner because I couldn't stomach watching Penelope play Happy Families at our table, Dad had pulled me aside later. "Your mother's upset. This bitterness isn't attractive, Bianca. You're 41, not 14. They keep saying I was bitter. As if I was the problem. As if my refusal to smile and play nice while my former best friend wore my brother's ring, the ring I'd helped him choose for someone else once, made me the villain." Now, standing in the paint aisle with customers browsing around me, I realized I'd been holding my breath. So I'm not invited to your 40th anniversary because Hugo's bringing the woman who tried to let me marry someone while sleeping with him? Don't be dramatic. We just think it's better this way. Smaller gathering, close family only. You understand. Hugo's fiancé isn't family, Mum. I am. Her silence was enough. We'll do something together another time, she said finally, voice bright and false. Just us. Lunch somewhere nice. I hung up without saying goodbye. The rest of my shift passed in a fog. I mixed paint with a smile plastered on my face and helped a woman choose between seashell white and porcelain cream while inside I felt something cold and sharp taking shape. That evening, alone in my flat with its second-hand furniture and walls I'd never bothered to paint properly, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened social media. I deleted most of my accounts after the engagement ended, unable to bear the sympathetic messages and the thinly veiled curiosity. But I'd kept one account, a private one, just to keep tabs on the invitations to family events I might actually want to attend. The anniversary party was all over Hugo's feed. He'd posted a photo of the invitation, cream cardstock with gold lettering, 40 years printed in elegant script. The comments underneath made my throat tight. Can't wait to celebrate with you all. Penelope had written with a champagne emoji. My aunt had replied, it'll be wonderful to have the whole family together. The whole family. I sat there on my worn sofa, still in my work clothes that smelled like paint thinner and sawdust, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Rage. Pure, clean and focused rage. They'd erased me. Made me the problem. Rewritten the story so that I was the bitter ex-friend who couldn't move on, rather than the victim of a calculated betrayal. And now they were having a party to celebrate family, love, and commitment while the person who actually believed in those things sat alone in a flat she could barely afford after losing her wedding deposits. I opened my laptop. I didn't have a plan yet. But I had something better. I had the truth. And I had 6 days until the party. The first thing I did was make a list. Not a revenge list, just a list of facts, the kind of list I'd made 1,000 times at work when organizing inventory or planning displays. Fact 1. Penelope had betrayed me deliberately over months while planning my wedding. Fact 2. Callum had been planning to let me marry him before revealing the affair. Fact 3. Hugo knew all of this and had chosen to date her anyway. Fact 4. My parents had chosen Penelope's comfort over my presence at their anniversary. Fact 5. Everyone believed I was the problem. I stared at that last one for a long time. That was the one that burned. Not the betrayal itself but the rewriting of it. The way my pain had been reframed as bitterness, my boundaries as drama and my absence as childishness. The next morning I called in sick to work. I wasn't sick, but I also wasn't capable of smiling at customers while this thing inside me grew teeth. I spent the day digging. I still had access to the wedding planning folder Penelope and I had shared, tucked away in my cloud storage. I'd never deleted it, too painful to look at but too sentimental to erase completely. Inside were months of messages, photos and spreadsheets. Evidence of a friendship that had seemed unbreakable. I read through them with new eyes. There, buried in a message from 7 months before the wedding, was Penelope complaining about her relationship with her boyfriend at the time. He's so boring, I need someone with ambition. Someone who's actually going somewhere. 2 weeks later, Callum had mentioned to me that Penelope had asked him for advice about a design project. He'd seemed flattered. I'd been pleased they were getting along. I opened my old laptop, the one I'd used before upgrading last year. It took 15 minutes to boot up, and another 10 to remember the password to Callum's cloud account, the one we'd shared for wedding planning. He'd never removed my access. Inside, the evidence was laid out like a timeline of deception. Photos of them together dating back 8 months before I'd found out. Hotel receipts. Restaurant bookings and messages that made me feel physically sick. But there was something else. Something I hadn't known about. An email chain between Callum and Hugo from 2 months after my engagement ended. Hugo, bank's still not speaking to me. Mum thinks she'll come around eventually. Callum, give her time. She's always been stubborn. Penelope feels terrible about it. Hugo, does she though? She seems pretty happy now that you're both free to be together properly. Callum, your sister was never going to be enough for me long term. She's too ordinary. Penelope gets my ambitions. Too ordinary, I repeated. I read that line 5 times, each time feeling smaller. Then I read Hugo's response. Probably for the best then. Bianca's always been a bit limited in her thinking. Penelope's got more spark. My own brother. I closed the laptop and sat in the growing darkness of my flat, watching shadows creep across the walls. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd discussed me like I was a problem they'd solved. A boring obstacle between them and their more interesting lives. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed watching the ceiling, my mind spinning through possibilities and discarding them one by one. I could post the messages publicly. That will be too simple and easy to dismiss as me being bitter again. I could confront them at the party. That would be too dramatic. They'd close ranks and I'd be the scene-causing villain once more. I could send everything to my parents. They'd already chosen sides. Whatever I did had to be perfect and undeniable. Something that would make them understand exactly what they'd done, exactly who they'd chosen to celebrate while erasing me. On Thursday, 3 days before the party, I drove past the venue. It was a hotel on the outskirts of Brighton, the kind of place that does proper afternoon teas and has chintz curtains in the windows. I parked across the street and watched staff carrying in flower arrangements, boxes of champagne, and a banner that read 40 Years of Love. A woman I didn't recognize directed the deliveries, clipboard in hand. I watched her tick items off a list, watched her smile at the staff and watched her check her phone. On impulse, I got out of the car and walked over. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm with the Morrison party? The anniversary on Saturday? I just wanted to check what time you need us here for photos." She glanced at her clipboard. "Family photos at 2:30 before the other guests arrive at 3. "Brilliant. And that's definitely immediate family only for the photos." "That's what Mrs. Morrison specified. Just the 4 of you and partners." "The 4 of you?" "My mum, my dad. Hugo and Penelope." I thanked her and walked back to my car on legs that felt numb. 4 of them. Not 5. I had been erased so completely they'd even arranged the family photos without accounting for me. That evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, I finally understood what I needed to do. This wasn't about exposing them publicly. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about making them see themselves clearly. Making them sit with the reality of what they'd done and making them feel, for just one moment, the hollowness of celebrating family while actively dismantling it. I opened my laptop and started planning. Friday morning, I woke with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night where every thought has been sorted, examined, and filed into place. "Called Hugo." He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious. "Bianca, I need to talk to you about tomorrow," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Can we meet for coffee?" Silence. Then, "I'm pretty busy with party prep." "Half an hour. That cafe near your flat." "Please, Hugo. I don't want things to be like this forever." I heard him exhale. "All right. 11 o'clock. I arrived at 10:45 and chose a table near the window. When Hugo walked in, I saw the wariness in his shoulders, the way he glanced around as if checking for witnesses before sitting down. "Thanks for meeting me," I said quietly. He nodded, ordering an espresso when the waitress came over. I already had a tea I wasn't drinking. "Look," he started, but I held up a hand. "Let me talk first. Please." He settled back, arms crossed defensively. "I know I haven't handled this well," I began, the words I'd practiced flowing out carefully. "I've been angry and hurt, and I've let that get in the way of my family. Mum's right. I've been bitter." Something in Hugo's posture shifted, softened slightly. "I don't expect you to understand how I felt, but I do understand that you've moved on with Penelope, and I need to accept that." Each word tasted like rust, but I kept my face open, vulnerable. "Tomorrow is about Mum and Dad. Not about me or my feelings. I'm not coming to the party," I continued. "I think Mum's right that it would be awkward. But I want to do something for them." I pulled a small wrapped box from my bag. "I made this for them. It's a photo album with pictures from their wedding, photos of us as kids and our family holiday memories. I'd spent 2 days on it and it was real. Every photo carefully chosen, every page a reminder of when we'd actually been a family." Hugo's expression cracked slightly. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." "Could you give it to them tomorrow? Maybe during the family photos before the other guests arrive? I think it would mean something coming from all of us." He took the box slowly, turning it over in his hands. "There's a card inside too," I added. "Just something private for them." I thought it might be nice if you read it aloud so they know it's from the heart. That's really thoughtful. He looked at me with something like guilt. Maybe you should be there tomorrow. I could talk to Mum. No, I said firmly. Let's not make it complicated. Just give them the album, read the card, and let them know I'm thinking of them. That's enough for me. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before Hugo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, grimaced. Penelope. She's asking about the seating chart. You should go, I said, standing. Thank you for meeting me. And Hugo. I paused. I really do hope you're happy. The lie sat between us, but he smiled in relief. Thanks, this means a lot. Really. I watched him leave, the box tucked under his arm, and sat back down. The album was real. The photos were genuine. But the card inside wasn't what Hugo thought it was. That afternoon I made one more trip to a print shop in Hove where nobody knew me. I need these printed, I told the teenager behind the counter, handing over a USB drive. High-quality photo paper 8x10s. He plugged it in, glanced at the screen. How many copies? 40, I said. One for each year. He nodded and started the print job without really looking at the images. I waited while the printer hummed and clicked, watching each photo slide into the tray. They were screenshots. Every damning message between Callum and Penelope. Every hotel receipt and every joke was made at my expense. The email exchange between Hugo and Callum. All of it, printed in stark black and white. At the bottom of each page I'd added a single line of text. This is what you chose to celebrate instead of your daughter. The kid at the counter packed them into a large envelope without comment, and I paid in cash. That evening I prepared the final piece. Inside the photo album I'd given Hugo beneath the family photos was a card. Not the sentimental message he expected. Instead, in my neatest handwriting. Mom and Dad. By the time Hugo reads this aloud at your party, you'll understand why I couldn't watch you celebrate 40 years of family while erasing me from it. The 4 of you in your family photo. The 4 of you in your seating chart. The 4 of you moving forward while I disappear into being the bitter daughter who couldn't forgive. But here's what I couldn't forgive. Not just the betrayal, but your choice to celebrate the person who orchestrated it. I've spent 6 months being told I'm too sensitive, too angry, too unable to move on. So I did move on. Just not in the way you wanted. The envelope Hugo is about to open contains printouts of every message, every receipt, and every piece of evidence showing exactly what Penelope and Callum did. More importantly, it shows what Hugo knew and chose to ignore. What you all knew and chose to ignore. I don't expect an apology anymore. I don't expect anything. But I do expect you to look at those photos, look at the woman you're celebrating, and ask yourselves what family actually means to you. 40 years of marriage is an achievement. I hope the champagne tastes worth it. Bianca. I'd included instructions on the envelope for Hugo. Please read aloud before opening. He'd do it too. Hugo had always been obedient about following directions at family gatherings. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. I didn't go near the hotel. Instead, I went to work volunteering for a shift I didn't need to take. My phone stayed on silent in my locker. At 2:30, while I was mixing paint for a customer choosing bedroom colors, my family was gathering for photos. At 2:35, Hugo would be presenting the album. At 2:40, he'd be reading my card aloud. At 2:45, he'd be opening the envelope. I didn't need to be there to see it. Some revenge is loud and public. Mine was intimate. Private and contained to the exact 4 people who'd decided I wasn't family anymore. I finished my shift at 5 and walked home slowly through Brighton's streets, past shop fronts decorated for Christmas, past families laughing together, past couples holding hands. My phone had 37 missed calls when I finally checked it. I deleted them without listening to the voicemails. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by my window watching the darkening sky, and waited. The photograph appeared on my brother's social media at 11:30 that night. I'd been lying in bed, not sleeping, just existing in that strange hollow space where time doesn't quite work properly. My phone lit up with a notification. Someone had tagged me. I opened it. The photo showed the 4 of them, my parents in the center looking stunned, Hugo and Penelope on either side. But it wasn't a celebration photo. Their faces were wrong. Mum's makeup was smudged like she'd been crying. Dad's hand was raised mid-gesture, frozen in what looked like an argument. Hugo's expression was pure shock. And Penelope. Penelope looked terrified. The caption, posted by Hugo, said only, family. But it was the comments that told the real story. Aunt Shirley, what on earth happened? Your mother called me in tears. Uncle Graham, this is inappropriate. Delete this immediately. My cousin Louise, is someone going to explain what's going on? And then 20 minutes later, another comment from Hugo himself. Ask Bianca. Within an hour my phone was ringing constantly. I let every call go to voicemail, but I listened to them in order, piecing together the disaster I hadn't witnessed. Mum's voice shaking. How could you do this? At our anniversary? In front of everyone? We raised you better than this cruelty, Bianca. You've destroyed everything. Don't bother calling back. Dad, quieter but somehow worse. Your mother is devastated. I don't know what you thought you'd accomplish, but you've broken her heart. Penelope left in tears. Hugo won't speak to us. I hope you're satisfied. Hugo furious. You absolute coward. You couldn't even face us yourself? You had to humiliate us in front of everyone? Penelope's family was there. Do you understand what you've done? I listened to all 17 voicemails twice. Then I opened my laptop and wrote an email. Not to them but to myself. Because some things need to be said even if nobody else will hear them. They still don't understand. They think I humiliated them. They think I destroyed the party out of spite. They don't see that they destroyed our family 6 months ago when they chose comfort over truth. When they decided my pain was less important than avoiding awkwardness. Mum called me cruel. But it wasn't cruel to let Callum plan a life with me while sleeping with my best friend. It wasn't cruel for Hugo to date her anyway. It wasn't cruel to erase me from family photos and seating charts and party invitations. Dad said I broke Mum's heart. Who broke mine? I saved the email in my drafts folder, unsent, unread by anyone but me. Sunday morning I woke to silence. No more calls or messages. Just one text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Aunt Shirley. Your parents gave me your new number. I need you to call me. I stared at it for 10 minutes before dialing. She answered immediately. Bianca, finally. Aunt Shirley. No, let me talk first. Her voice was firm but not unkind. I've spoken to your mother. And I've spoken to Hugo. And I've also seen the photos. My stomach dropped. I didn't mean for. Hush. I know exactly what you meant. And I know what they've been telling everyone for months. That you're bitter. That you couldn't let go and you were making things difficult. I waited. I also know what Penelope did. What Callum planned. What your brother chose to ignore. She paused. Your parents are devastated, Bianca. But not for the reasons you think. I don't understand. Those photos you printed, half the family saw them. Penelope's parents saw them. By the time the party was supposed to start, Penelope had left, Hugo was shouting, and your mother was locked in the bathroom crying. Not because you'd exposed the truth but because the truth existed at all. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. They built a version of events where you were the problem, Aunt Shirley continued. Where Penelope was just someone who'd made a mistake. Where Hugo was being mature by moving on. They believed their own story so completely that seeing the reality in black and white, it shattered something. Good, I whispered. Maybe, she said. But Bianca, what you did, it wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. You held up a mirror and forced them to see themselves. And people don't forgive that easily. I don't need their forgiveness. No. You need their understanding. And right now they're not capable of giving it. We sat in silence for a moment. What do I do now? Asked finally. You live your life. You let them sit with what they saw. And you wait. Because Bianca, the truth has a funny way of settling. Right now they're angry. Give them time to move past anger into shame. That's when things might actually change. After I hung up, I made tea and sat at my kitchen table watching the morning light fill the room. My phone stayed quiet all day Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday a card arrived in the post. No return address, but I recognized Mum's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single sentence. Come for lunch on Sunday. Just us. Please. I stared at it for an hour before responding with a text to her mobile. Just us means who? Her reply came immediately. You, me, your father. Nobody else. That Sunday I drove to my parents' house for the first time in 6 months. Mum opened the door looking smaller than I remembered. Dad stood behind her, hands in his pockets. We sat in their kitchen, the three of us, with tea none of us drank. "We owe you an apology," Mum said finally, her voice cracking. "Not for being upset about how you told us, but for making you feel you had to." Dad nodded slowly. "We chose wrong, Bianca. We wanted to keep the peace, and in doing that, we chose someone else's comfort over your pain." I didn't cry. I'd done enough crying. "Hugo and Penelope broke up," Mum added quietly. 3 days after the party. He said he couldn't look at her the same way after seeing those messages laid out like that. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Not for what I'd done, but for the fact that it had come to this at all. "Don't be," Dad said. "You did what we should have done months ago. You told the truth. We just wish you'd trusted us enough to tell us privately first." "I tried," I reminded them gently. "You called me bitter." Mum flinched. We talked for 3 hours. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was honest. And sometimes honesty is the first step toward something that might eventually feel like family again. When I left, Mum hugged me at the door. "The photo album you made," she whispered. "We looked through it properly after everyone left. After we calmed down. It reminded us of who we used to be." I drove home as the sun set, painting Brighton streets in orange and gold. My phone buzzed with a message from Hugo. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Some conversations need more than text messages and hurt feelings. But I didn't delete it either. Months have passed since the anniversary party that never quite happened. The family WhatsApp group my parents started has 7 members now instead of 8. Penelope's name has been quietly removed from family conversations, from future plans, from the narrative we tell ourselves about who we are. Hugo and I have coffee sometimes. Awkward, careful conversations where we talk around the center of things rather than through them. He apologized once, properly, sitting across from me at the same cafe where I'd given him that album. "I should have protected you," he said. "Instead, I protected my own comfort." I'd nodded, accepting the words without quite forgiving them yet. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a switch you flip. It's a door you open slowly, checking each time whether the person on the other side has actually changed or just learned better words. Mum still texts me weekly, usually photos of the garden or questions about paint colors. Small attempts to rebuild a connection that frayed so badly it nearly snapped. Dad sends longer messages, apologies dressed up as observations about football or weather, his way of saying "I see you now" without the vulnerability of actually saying it. Some people have asked if I regret what I did. If holding up that mirror, forcing them to see the truth they'd been hiding from, was worth losing the version of family we'd pretended to be. The answer is simpler than they expect. I don't regret it. Because that version of family was built on my silence. On my willingness to disappear so others could be comfortable. On the belief that my hurt mattered less than avoiding awkwardness. And I'm done being the person who disappears. What I did wasn't pretty. It wasn't kind. It was deliberate and calculated and designed to hurt in exactly the way I'd been hurt, invisibly, in the places we don't show other people. But it was also true. And sometimes truth is the most revolutionary thing you can offer a family that's built itself on comfortable lies. I still live in my flat with the walls I've finally started painting. I still work at the hardware shop, still mix misty morning gray and porcelain cream for customers choosing between shades that barely differ. I still wake up some mornings feeling the ghost of that wedding I didn't have, that life I thought was mine. But I also wake up knowing I chose myself. Finally, without apology. That photo my brother posted, the one with all 4 of them looking shattered and stunned, got deleted within a day. But I saved it. Not as proof or evidence, but as a reminder. A reminder that some families need to break before they can heal. And that the person brave enough to break them is usually the one who loved them most. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever been the truth teller in a family of secret keepers, leave a comment below. Tell me how it ended for you. Whether you chose silence or exposure, whether your family chose you back. And if you stayed until the end, if you understand why some truths are worth the cost, hit that subscribe button, like and share this video with someone. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to disappear. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.